Mr. Mayor, we're good to go.
We ready? Good evening. Welcome to the City of Sugar Land City Council meeting for Tuesday, September the 1st. First item on the agenda is our invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilmember Himesh Gandhi. Himesh.
Thank you, Mayor. Please join me in prayer. As we gather today together in prayer, we ask that we be blessed with your wisdom and clarity. May we be impartial and just in all the decisions to be made this evening, and may our efforts succeed to enhance our community for the benefit of all. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, one and indivisible.
With liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mesh. Item number 2, review the consent agenda. Item number 3, the consent agenda. There's only 2 items tonight, so we're going to take them in one motion unless somebody...
Mr. Mayor, you missed a public comment.
Oh, missed public comment. Sorry about that. All right, hold on. Let's go to the public comment. This is for anybody that wants to speak about an item that doesn't have a public hearing. Thomas, do we have anybody?
Yes, sir. We have Mr. Bernardo Lorena, and I'm going to transfer him from the waiting room right now.
Mr. Lorena.
Mr. Lorena, if you will unmute, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Mr. Lorena, you're on.
And thank you for taking my call, Mr. Mayor, the city council members. Hello?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for taking my call. I'm calling about the enclave at River Park residents.
Mr. Lorena, if you'll mute your TV or whatever you're live streaming from behind you, we're getting a lot of feedback. If you'll mute that, please, before you continue.
Okay, that's done. So I learned that we have some additional tax to pay for the public improvement district that was created by the developer in this area here. This is for the enclave at River Park. And I was kind of surprised with that because of I used to live in Brazos Landing where it was not part of a sugar land and we had taxes for the mud and so on. But after it was annexed to the city, it kind of got into the city tax and was much lower. So when I moved down here, this area was annexed to the city in 2009. So I'm kind of surprised that I need to pay an additional tax besides the property tax that all of us paid already. So that was one surprise I got. And the second one was that I had mentioned is that this was not really disclosed during the negotiations for the home that I would have that we would have another tax for that. It's kind of City Council member Steve Porter had mentioned that would be on the papers that we sign, and yes, it is, but it's kind of it's a 4-line that just says it's conditions between the city and the developer when I got the house a date, and then the tax is a reimbursement agreement. But that's all what it says, versus a 15 or 25-year loan, kind of a loan, if you will, that needs to be paid. And I talked with several residents in the area here, and they were not aware of it either. So with that, I'd like to, and we have paid about close to 700,000, including taxes, up to this date. So what I would like to ask you, the city and the mayor is kind of we be not responsible for the remaining amount that is left for the following years. We are kind of in a transition now that with the COVID-19 and everything else that is happening with that.
20 seconds left, Mr. Lorena. 20 seconds left.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lorena.
Yeah, I would like to ask the city to consider that we don't pay those assessments.
All right, thank you, sir.
And thank you.
Thomas, is there anyone else?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor. That is all.
All right, thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Mr. Lorena. We're going to move on to review consent agenda. We've got 2 items on the consent agenda. If the council member wants to pull one, we'll have a brief presentation. Do I have a motion?
To approve the consent agenda, Mayor.
Second.
Got a motion by Gandhi, second by McCutcheon. If you vote at this time, please. Got a few people holding
I'm
out.
not getting, mine's not coming up, Thomas.
Why don't we do a roll call vote? Nishad?
Yes, Mayor.
Himesh?
Aye.
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Jennifer?
Aye.
Stuart?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so it passes 7-0. Thank you all. Item number 4, contracts and agreements. Consideration of and action on authorization of amendment number 1 to a contract with MVBA LLC DBA Accounts Receivables Collections Group for the collection of delinquent emergency medical services and miscellaneous accounts receivable. And we have Ms. Jennifer Brown, our Director of Finance. Jennifer.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. This item may sound familiar to some of you. Back in March, we awarded a contract to MVBA, which is McCreary, Veselka, Bride, and Allen, after we solicited proposals for our EMS and miscellaneous receivables collections. Their proposed fee was 17% of the amount collected. This contract was subject to a new legislative requirement after the passage of House Bill 2826 in the 2019 legislative session. That bill requires the Attorney General to review and approve all contingent fee legal services contracts. And so although the City Council approved this on March 17th, we have to submit it to the AG's office. If you'll go to the next slide, please. And so we submitted that contract to the Attorney General's office after Council approved. The AG determined that the contract that we submitted did not meet their requirements because the contract did not include language concerning how the contingent fee would be computed or calculated for individual recoveries in excess of $100,000. We requested reconsideration of that requirement because under this contract, there will never be a single recovery in excess of $100,000. The AG refused to waive that requirement. Next slide, please. And so we've gone back to MVBA, and this amendment number 1 adds a new subject section to the contract. It states within the amendment that there will be no attorneys, law clerks, or paralegals performing work under the agreement, and so therefore the reasonable hourly rate for legal work is $0 per hour, and that the contingent fee for individual recoveries is 17% of the amount recovered, even in excess of $100,000. And this is consistent with the fee that was set under their proposal for the request for proposals. Next slide, please. So as part of the approval of the amendment, Council must find that the contract is necessary for the efficient collection of the delinquent EMS via billings and miscellaneous receivables. The city does not possess the necessary staff, computer software, or programming or experience to internally conduct these collection services, and that acquiring these will result in substantial expense to the city, and an hourly fee for delinquent collection work would likely exceed the amounts of delinquent accounts due. Next slide, please. So staff recommends that council approve amendment number 1 to the contract with MVBA for collections of EMS billing and miscellaneous receivables debt that is delinquent. Upon approval by City Council, the staff will then resubmit the contract to the Attorney General's office for review, and the contract does not become effective until it is approved by the AG office, and the contract period is 1 year with 4 one-year renewal options. Next slide, please. And whoever makes the motion for this item that would need to word the findings as part of the motion, so I've listed those here on the slide. And I'd be happy to answer any questions after that.
I'll go ahead and make the motion, Jennifer. I make a motion to approve amendment number 1 to the contract with MVBA LLC, finding that 1, this contract is necessary for the efficient collection of delinquent emergency medical services accounts and other miscellaneous receivables. 2, the city does not possess the necessary staff, computer software programming, or experience to internally conduct these collection services, and acquiring these will result in substantial expense to the city. And finally, 3, an hourly fee for delinquent collection work would likely exceed the amounts of delinquent bills due. Do I have a second?
Second.
Got a second by McCutcheon. Any questions?
Question, please, Mayor.
Stewart?
Jennifer, could you please go back and explain the amendment that describes no attorneys performing services, et cetera?
Yes, sir. Can we go to slide 12, please? Okay, well, while we wait for that to come up, basically, MVBA asserts that there are no attorneys doing work under this contract. They happen to be a law firm that has a collections bureau under them, and maybe Meredith can kind of help explain some of this, but there are no attorneys that will be doing any work. So they have a separate staff that does this work, and so part of the amendment is just stating that they are not performing any legal work for us under this contract. They're performing collections work for us.
Follow-up, please.
At 17% of they collect.
And so, Jennifer, this helps us comply with House Bill such and such in what way?
26. Their requirement is that we establish a fee for the individual recoveries, and that the fact that we can't establish an hourly rate. It doesn't make sense to establish an hourly rate for this. Well, 1, because we're not having attorneys perform this work, and then 2, you can't put an hourly rate to collections work, because if you're collecting, a $50 alarm, false alarm fee, you're very quickly going to outpace the amount that you're collecting if you do it that way. Does that make sense?
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Steve?
So Jennifer, we get the first $100,000 and they don't get any fees over until they collect $100,000?
Yes, sir.
Or they only get to collect a fee on those accounts over 100. I'm just a little bit.
Certainly. The original contract, or the original contract that was approved, we're paying them 17% of whatever they collect.
Right.
That contract did not specifically call out what we would pay them if any single recovery exceeded $100,000. It didn't cover that because they're not going to recover anything over $100,000 because they're not collecting those types of receivables for us.
From a single collection. Yeah.
Yes, from a single collection, and that would be huge. That would be generally that bill is addressed for legal services, and it is generally targeted at, well, we'll represent you in this lawsuit, and then we'll take a percentage of whatever we recover. That is what that bill was intended to cover. This is kind of a unintended consequence, I believe, of that bill and the fact that we have a law firm doing this type of work for us, they're not actually performing legal services or recovering settlements for us in that manner.
So would I be correct in saying that other than extra work for staff, finance and legal, and time to run it back and forth to the Attorney General, nothing changes?
Correct. And we've not been able to enact this contract yet.
Yeah.
So basically, they've put us off 6 months from the original effective date.
Thank you.
Steve, you can categorize this as overreach by our state government, pure and simple.
What a shock.
What a shock. I've got a motion and a second. Any other questions? If you'll vote at this time, please.
Yeah, mine is not coming up, Thomas.
Commissioner, you okay with yours?
No, I'm not, Mayor. It's not popping up. So.
Okay. Roll call vote. Nishad? He's good. Hamesh?
Yes.
Steve? Jennifer?
Aye.
Stuart?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
And it passes 7-0. Thank you, council members. Item number 5, ordinances and resolutions. 5A, consideration of an action on City of Sugar Land Resolution number 2018, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sugar Land, Texas, authorizing the city manager to execute a professional services agreement with Texas Coalition for Affordable Power, Inc., TCAP, to participate in the strategic hedging program and to authorize TCAP to procure electricity in the wholesale market on behalf of the City of Sugar Land, and authorizing the city manager to execute the commercial electricity service agreement with Jexa Energy, LP, for electricity to be provided on and after January 1st, 2023. Chris Stubing, our Assistant City Manager. Chris.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Can I walk you through some of the history of TCAP and how it came about, and also introduce some folks that are here with us tonight. But before I get to that, again, as everybody realizes, the energy market was deregulated in early 2000 stuff with the state of Texas. So in 2006, Sugar Land joined the South Texas Aggregation Project, which included 41 political subdivisions in this region to procure electricity. Again, aggregating, growing that demand so you can hopefully buy down your price. In 2011, STAP merged with the city's aggregation power project, which added additional 82 members. And that formed TCAP. So we've been a member of TCAP since 2011. We've had Mike, city manager, as a previous board member. I stepped into his seat and stuff when he'd left us to go to Coral Springs, and he came back. So I've been on the board now a little over 3 years. In 2016, this current contract that we're under was negotiated and approved for the span of 2018 through 2022. It's been a very good contract and stuff for us at the city. We've seen significant savings with it. We're in that process again in planning and preparing for the electricity purchase for 2023 and beyond. And TCAP, doing what they do, has included some strategies as far as what to look and how to procure that electricity. And that's what we're here to discuss with you this evening on the strategic hedging program for its member cities. Next slide, please. So what is TCAP? So the Texas Coalition of Affordable Power is 166 members strong. The breakdown you see here, it is made up of 15 board members, which I'll get into on the next slide, has a total energy demand of about 1.2 billion kilowatt hours, and is represented by our executive director, Margaret Summer Eve, who was on in the meeting as well with us, as well as Bill Starnes with Resolved Energy, who's one of our experts and stuff in the energy procurement field. So this is not just a bunch of city managers, assistant city managers, and everybody thinking they know how to buy power. We've got expertise on our side for sure. Next slide. This is the board makeup that you'll see, noticing spread out across the state. The Houston region has 2 seats on the board at this point in time. We have Tom Ball and, of course, myself representing Sugar Land. You can see Duncanville, Victoria, all over. We incorporate the north, south, west. You would think the East Zone, but Houston Zone is referred to as the Houston Zone itself, just from the sheer size of the city of Houston and stuff in it as well. Next. So the future electricity procurement. So this current contract, many may look and say, well, it's only 2020. What are we talking about this now for? This current contract ends December of 2022. It was a 5-year contract. Yes, we still have our 2 years remaining. What we're here to discuss this evening is kind of the procurement beyond that period. Although we still have 2 years left, TCAP is charged with finding the best, most advantageous ways for cities to procure energy while looking out, of course, for taxpayers, for the fees that we're paying and everything else, and just the general cost of that electricity. They've brought this back to the board in 2019 for us to start considering and ask questions, get feedback as we were planning to move forward in the direction for procuring for that contract timeframe. It's interesting to note that Sugar Land, you saw the 1.2 billion kilowatt hours total that represents TCAP. Sugar Land represents a little over 50 million kilowatt hours of that. So we are a sizable chunk, especially in the Houston region. Our total annual cost for energy is about $5.5 million, including all fees and charges as well. The current contract has provided us significant savings from the transition 2017 into 2018, the first initial year. We've experienced in the area of $600,000 to $700,000 a year in savings just between those two contracts. So again, the membership with TCAP is buying us value for sure, and we've seen that throughout the years. And again, we're just looking to continue that moving forward. In dealing with the energy market, the one thing we do realize is we always want to plan ahead, and that's what Margaret and the consultants stuff for TCAP have brought to us, and that's what we're here tonight. The future procurement provides two options for us. The continued along the lines of a fixed price contract, which is kind of our current contract. You put all your information together, you go out to the market, you receive proposals, and you hope you timed everything right, and you move into that next 5-year contract, or the strategic hedging side, and we're going to get into this a little bit more as we go into the PowerPoint. Next slide, please. So again, real quick, the fixed year contract. The graph on your bottom right really shows kind of the next 5 years, that 2023 to 2027 timeframe. That's typically been the sweet spot of what you would look at. And this is not the cents on here are not to say this is exactly what's going to happen. This is just kind of a representation of when you're bidding these out for long terms, there are certain risks associated with this. And we've been in front of the Finance Audit Committee a couple of times. I know Councilmember Jacobson has harped on what are the risks kind of both ways. This is just one of those that you see in the long-term contract. It panned out for us this time really well because you can see the pricing kind of what was in 2019 and 2020, which has been really good for us. But the timing is critical when you go through that process. So kind of want to show you the difference between this approach and then as we get into the strategic hedging side, and I think you'll see the difference there. Again, in this long term, you're paying for that out year risk and uncertainty. You're asking those companies to guarantee you that electricity at a set particular price for 5 years when there are certain unknowns. That's where we think this program that they've brought to us provides a little more advantage for us to really control kind of our next steps and where we are in the marketplace and to get a better understanding of just what the market's looking like as we move down the line of procurement. Next slide. So SHP, the approach there and what's different about it. Instead of one big RFP or your proposal or bid side approach for a 5-year deal, it is using the competitive RFP process for procurement, which is it's 20 plus vetted creditworthy suppliers. The true energy portfolio is represented and at least 4 suppliers will be on that TCAP portfolio at all times. So if you have for some reason one that is not responding or performing, you can immediately drop and go to the next. The suppliers are vetted. They can be added or deleted as desired, just as you go through, and you'll see as we get into some of the tables later on that explain kind of the bidding process. Periodic procurements, multiple RFPs for each year's procurement to mitigate these price risks. So you'll see where we're doing monthly procurements in 21 for what the energy cost would be in 23. It avoids that all-in guess of a single fixed price, a multi-year deal, and no need to change the retail electric provider, which is JEXA for us right now, to capture price. But we do have the right under TCAP to change that if for some reason they falter or are not providing us the services from the billing and meter perspective. It fits the needs. The board has sat through many presentations of this and vetted this a lot. Price known, for your fiscal year budgeting, we'll know in early 22 as we're before the budgeting cycle for 23. The market is competitive, avoids having to explain long-term out-of-market price to citizens and everything else. Periodic off-ramps. That is one thing we asked for, is that there is a way out. Should you get in and you start to see the market changing for some reason, how do we transition to back to a fixed contract? And they have included that in this process. And again, renewables, that is a big thing. We've seen it in grant applications. We've seen it in other federal grant applications that the city's working on and requesting. They like to see the use of renewables and everything else. You usually get points for that as well. And TCAP, we have a way that, our energy right now is this way. And again, the SHP does not change this. We have the ability to get those renewable energy credits to make contracts completely renewable. Next slide. So, as y'all know me, I do not claim to be an energy expert or anything in the oil and gas field by any means, but what the Department of Energy and what our consultants have provided to the board and to us as a member city is just kind of the positive outlook in the future, whether it be supply of crude or natural gas. You're seeing a stable outlook, which means prices, there'll be some fluctuations here and there, but again, it looks stable. So it's an opportunity for us to start taking this acquisition at shorter pieces of time, 2-year kind of time frames rather than a long-term 5-year. And again, we still have the opt-out piece if we decide to lock in, because we just see something that might be uncomfortable, in the future as we go through it. So just wanted to kind of show you some of the information that's been provided to us at the board as we've gone through kind of the research and looking at a lot of this information. Next slide. Again, the U.S. energy markets should be well supplied in coming years. I think everybody's heard from the national standpoint how we are the leading producer, I think, in oil and stuff, and it's of course nowhere to send it or store it right now. So, but there is no doubt an abundant supply, and it appears to be stable or somewhat declining on the oil and natural gas prices. It's been pretty stable here the past few months. The electric markets are also predicted to be stable as well. We went through a issue in 2018 with a couple of coal-fired plants going offline. So we were managing the summers through 18 and early 19 with dealing with some of that with ERCOT and just the energy load and demand, but we've seemed to handle all that well, and we've seen more renewables come online, so that's helped us there as well. So we've got excess generation over peak usage needs is improving quickly, which really helps to balance out those ups and downs, those peaks and valleys as we're dealing with just acquiring electricity. Next slide. So how the timeline of events work in this, and again, when we get to the question side, I will definitely fall back to Margaret and Bill and stuff to help explain this in much more detail if needed. In 2021, the proposal is, should council elect to go the strategic hedging route, they will start acquiring energy in January of 21, and the plan is to have 12 competitive bidding cycles throughout the entire year of 2021. And at the end of the year, that will be averaged and presented to us to bring forward to the city from the standpoint of what our electricity cost would be for the year 2023. And we will be able to have that before our budgeting cycle in 2022. So this kind of schedule just shows you every month that you're going to have that monthly purchase cycle. The nice thing is, if we have in July and August, where we typically see some spikes, if we have one of those, we don't have to accept. We can just wait and buy to the next month. So we can combine 2 months at that point in time. So it allows us to have some flexibility there in when we lock in that particular price or decide not to accept a July or August because we saw an increase, just because we typically see that with the energy demand and the congestion, a number of things, getting electricity out to the east side of the state. But we can not accept those at that point and just move and combine 2 months together and rebid that. You can see 2022, we would get the price announced for TCAP members, and we would bring that back from the budgeting cycle, but we also start the process again in January for the 2024 year. So we would do this same 12-month cycle. So we're sampling the market much more often. We're able to keep our thumb on the pulse of just what's going on and what the electricity providers, wholesale providers are seeing as well. So, and then you see the check kind of boxes here, stuff with the hatching in them and the question marks. So the key there, those are your off-ramp kind of decision standpoint. So this gets up and rolling. That is when we have a decision to say, yes, we're staying in, or no, you know what, we're going to go turn and lock in, a long-term contract. So you have those decision points there. And you can just see how this will repeat every year. And the goal would be we're looking for a 2-year approach rather than a 5-year long-term window, with the ability to take the off-ramp and go to a long-term, say 5, longer-term fixed-price contract. Next slide. Now, the one thing I've been asking a lot is, what is the advantage for Sugar Land from the SHP perspective? And this is some analysis that Margaret and Bill and the team has looked at, really in showing you under our current contract, which is indicated by the green line on this bar chart, what the 2018 SHP price would have been, which you can see is below. Then you look at 2019, and then the numbers correlate down below of what we anticipate conservatively additional savings would have been. So the 19,000 in 2018, the 61,000 in 2019. Now, in twisting Bill's arm in some of our discussions, and I think he had this conversation with the mayor as well, these are very conservative. So we could see things as great as $100,000+ additional savings per year as we move forward through this process. Now, is it guaranteed? No, nothing's guaranteed. But just in their analysis of the market and what we're seeing, it's a great opportunity for us to take this step and to be able to realize additional savings for the city and stuff, which again just equates to savings for our residents and just our operations. Next slide. So we'll kind of recap and just talk more of the advantages as we see it. The energy future does look positive. We all hear that with the abundant supplies and stable to low prices. SHP is a unique opportunity for the TCAP members. Again, all 166 of us. There's about, in my conversations with Margaret, I think 76 of the member cities have already taken action on this. And there are continue. There were several tonight. I think Grand Prairie and several others were having the same conversation we are today. It is structured to buy when the price is advantageous. So again, you avoid that buyer's remorse of, did we time it right? We're tying into a long-term contract. And the reason that's important is, in my experience now on the board, there were several cities that got out of TCAP. There were others that joined TCAP, and some that got out. Some in the Houston region thought they were going to get a better price, and they ended up paying 3, 4, 5 cents per kilowatt hour more. So again, we're seeing the advantage of the aggregation of 1.2 billion kilowatt hours. You come to the advantage of being able to really lower that price and buy that price down. It avoids carrying charges and risk premiums for that long-term contract. We're not putting that risk off on an energy provider. TCAP, we kind of take some of that on as a whole together, but looking at these shorter time frames. But again, the goal there is to keep that price even lower than what our current contract would be. And then we know future price prior to the budgeting side, as you saw on the chart, as we move these forward. So that was important that we're sampling that market and we're bringing those in time so everybody has a chance to budget for that demand. And our usage has been pretty consistent over the past couple of years with where we are under the new contract. So we're really good that we've got kind of a handle on what we're expending at this point, and would love to see some additional savings. It is an all renewable contract, so that's the nice thing as well. And it's flexible. Again, we have the can convert to fixed price kind of approach as we go through it. The goal, of course, would get into 23, see how the pricing is going for 21, for 23, and then continue to have those conversations and bring this information back to council, probably more often than we have on the 5-year standpoint, just to make sure everything is still tracking the way we anticipate it to be. Next slide. So the recommendation tonight, of course, is to ask council to consider and adopt Resolution 2018, electing to participate in the Texas Coalition of Affordable Power Strategic Hedging Program and approving the professional services agreement and the commercial electricity service agreement. And with that, I would gladly entertain any clarifying questions for myself or Margaret Summereve or Bill Starnes.
Questions? Steve?
Thank you, Mayor. So can you quantify the risk versus the savings? So if things go bad, bad for energy consumers, but great for the economy of the world, and people start flying, driving, riding, whatever again, and the price of natural gas goes way up, what happens to us? What is this risk, and can you quantify it? Maybe Stuart knows about this, but I'm not getting a feeling for the nature of the risk we're taking.
Sure, no, and I'll ask Bill or Margaret if they would like to chime in. Bill can probably explain it much better than I can, or Margaret, on that side. That's been a lot of the conversation we've had at the board level as well. So Bill, do you mind?
Oh, not at all. This is Bill Starnes. I don't think the risk is that great right now, honestly. We have, in simple terms, both as a nation and as a world, we are just awash in oil and gas. This is all the result of fracking. We have more than we can say grace over, which is why the price collapsed so bad when COVID hit, because between, beyond the little spat we had between Saudi Arabia and Russia, we had so much supply that it wasn't being used. The price was just falling. So I don't see, and I don't think I've seen any predictions out there where demand is going to outstrip supply over the next 10 or 20 years. I just don't see that. So I don't think we have a lot of risk there. Probably the biggest risk would be geopolitical. If there was suddenly some war to crop up somewhere that could, impact pricing. I think in most instances, we should see that well ahead of time and should be able to get you guys converted to a fixed price without, suffering irreparable damage. So I don't see a lot of risk to this at this point in time. It's just this is just a reaction and a change to the way we're procuring based on the fact that the market is just awash in supply and plans to be for a long time.
Thank you. This is a historic low in natural gas and energy prices. My personal preference, Chris, is to lock that very low number in for, as long as they'll let us. If we could go to a 10-year contract, that'd be fine with me at these prices. These are historic lows. Bill, I probably don't know 100th of what, your background is, but no matter how much you don't know the future. And I'm just not keen for our residents to take on a risk that I still can't quantify.
Steve, this may help you.
How bad does it get?
This may help you, Steve. The way I thought through this was, anytime you ask someone else, so if we keep the risk to us, we have the best chance of getting a decent price. If I'm going to transfer risk to you, you're going to make me pay for that risk. To your point about doing a long-term contract, let's say a fixed price for 5 years, because of the uncertainty in those 5 years, I'm going to make you pay for, maybe not for this year, but I'm going to make you pay for years 2 through 5. And I'm probably going to make you pay because you're making me take that risk, and I'm going to make darn sure I don't go out of business. And if you do it this way, what you're ended up doing is you're going to get to play in a little bit of the market. There's no doubt that there is risk. The question is that as much risk as the risk that you're transferring to that entity for a fixed price? And for me, when I thought about it, and this only works, Steve, this doesn't work if it's you and me and staff doing this. It only works with people like Bill and Margaret that are in the market every day. It's kind of like Stuart being in the stock market every day. I don't pay attention that much anymore. So you have to get somebody that's there every day that's watching the price fluctuation. If the price fluctuation seems to be going sideways, then you lock into a long-term contract and you eliminate that risk. This is what I think represents the best way to, to maintain a reasonable risk profile, if you will.
Well, I'll tell you, Mayor, our experience with getting somebody else to take the risk was good, especially in the benefits area of our city. And the reason is because we put a lot of emphasis on getting involved and helping people to stay healthy, to get healthy, and we incentivize that. And so there is some amount of control where we're taking the risk and where we have some control. But where we have no control, zero, I'm not keen on taking the risk. And I really don't understand why, if our experts have been in the market all the time, that the people that we would lay this risk on wouldn't see the same thing. So I'd rather take a bird in the hand on this deal. I've been around long enough to have watched the energy market. And I mean, if y'all decide to go that way, then that's the decision we make. But I'm going to sit this one out.
Okay, that's fair enough, Steve. Any questions from council members? Anyone else? LaShawn?
Yeah, Chris, we also have an out at any given point in time. Am I correct when I say that?
Yeah, that is the opt-out, those 2 points you saw in June and December throughout the year. So as you get in, and that was kind of Billy alluded to that a little bit stuff, you have a point that if for some reason we start to see shaky waters up ahead, we have an out to jump in, or even before that, we have an out to jump out and get in and tie into a long fixed-term contract. That's been presented to everybody, all the members and stuff of TCAP. And again, that's why it's not an all into this. They left it where we had an option. And that was really the discussions we had at the board level. Because we may see something differently. Bill wanted the ability to come to the board members and say, hey, we're starting to see some unrest, out there in years, and it doesn't turn, fortunately, in a month. It takes a while to get there, but we have those two options per year as far as the off ramps, as they refer.
Yeah, and then I'll just add that, Mayor, myself, and Councilmember Jacobson sit on Finance Audit. We've obviously reviewed this with you on a couple of different occasions. We've heard this from you and the team, so we appreciate the efforts that you've been putting in part of the board. But I'll also recommend that we keep it on our agenda, maybe every other agenda. That way the three of us get to understand, look at the rates. That way it's constantly in front of the three of us on behalf of the council. I'd recommend that.
No, definitely. That is something as we're going through the process and receiving those. That's one thing we like about it as well on the board standpoint, is being able to just see what's going on. And that's been one of the advantages Bill's presented to us every time we talk about it, is, again, that sampling, more often sampling of the market. And to Councilman Reporter's side is either way, you've got those risks, the long-term contract, and the mayor hit on it. We don't know what we're doing, what the energy companies are doing when they're providing that out year, because they're then taking on all that risk. And I equate it to a construction contract, a CMAR contract, where you're trying to balance that risk exposure really on both sides, so you can get not only the best product but the best price. It's that same thing. Except this case, we have no real control of what the energy companies would be doing from how they're looking at that out year longer term contract. And we've seen other members that have left to go get longer 9 and 10 year contracts, and they're paying much more than we are right now. So I mean, we've seen kind of examples of that here over the past few years, and it's something we hear about at our board meetings quite often. But definitely, to Councilor Kamali's point, we can bring this back. Once we go through our board meetings, I'll gladly bring back kind of an update as we're going through the process next year.
Stuart.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve, I don't think that there's as much risk as it might appear. I want to ask Bill a question, please. So, Bill, we call this just the strategic hedging program. Does that mean you're using financial instruments to help mitigate spikes in prices?
No, we're not. We are not getting into financial instruments. We're strictly buying future energy delivery. So it's when in our side of the business, when I buy a forward contract, even though it's a physical contract like we're talking here, we call that a hedge. And I know other people have a different, term for hedge. So I think if I had it to do over again, I would have renamed this program.
Futures contract.
But no, we're not buying futures. We're just buying future delivery of physical energy.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, respecting what you said, I'm going to make a motion that we approve, that we take the recommendation And then I think Councilman Kermally made a good point, which is we'll continue to monitor in the finance and audit such that if there is something that gets, I mean, volatility is the double-edged sword, depending on what side of the risk profile you're on. So we'll continue to monitor it, and if need be, Steve, we can convert it. So I'll make the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Was that, who is the second? Rashad?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Got a
Hope
second.
I'm wrong. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, no, I understand. I've got,
Roll call for me, Mayor.
yes, sir?
If you'll roll call for me.
Oh, roll call vote. Okay. I've got a motion. I've got a second. Roll call vote. Rashad?
Aye.
Kamesh?
Aye.
Steve?
Hey,
Okay. Jennifer?
Aye.
Stuart?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
It's a 6-1 vote. Thank you, council.
Thank you very much.
Item number 5B. First consideration of an action on City of Sugar Land Ordinance number 2211. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Sugar Land, Texas, amending the Code of Ordinances by amending Chapter 2, Article 5, Division 4, Section 2136, fees for various city services. Chapter 5, Article 8, Division 3, rates and charges, Sections 5246, 5265, and Chapter 5, Article 9, Division 1, Section 5421, fire protection fees for districts in extraterritorial jurisdiction by revising city service fees. Jennifer Brown, Director of Finance. You didn't think I'd get through that, did you?
I'm just chuckling, Mayor. I don't write the captions. Thank you. As you all are aware, as part of the budget process, we look at our user fees and we estimate our revenues based on the fees that we charge. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So we do have financial management policy statement direction on user fees. And so as part of that calculation, we look at calculating the full cost price for each service. We compare and evaluate our fees for market and competitive pricing, the effects that the pricing might have on demands for services, the impact it's having on users who are receiving the service, and the fact that if you set a user fee too high, it actually may result in a lower cost recovery because you're going to reduce your demand. And so once we look at user fees, we make recommendation to the city manager and the city council based on the information that we gathered. Next slide, please. The financial management policy statements direct that we do an annual CPI adjustment to our user fees as part of the budget process. We use the CPI for the Houston, the Woodlands, Sugar Land MSA, and a fee ordinance. These fees are adopted by ordinance at the beginning of each fiscal year, or actually just prior to the beginning of the fiscal year, and they're usually effective on January 1. The changes are effective for all activity that is billed after the effective date, so on or after January 1. And obviously we're not billing on January 1 because it's a holiday. Next slide, please. So the policy statements also provide for non-resident surcharges, and this is for where the city is providing services to non-residents that we may assess an out-of-city service fee for, or a non-resident user fee. And that helps us to recover some of the costs of service where there is a general public benefit, or where you could reasonably assume that a portion of the cost of the service is covered by property taxes, and you're, as a non-resident, they're not paying those taxes. The surcharges can either be set as an additional percentage or a separate fee for non-residents, and can either be established by ordinance or by contract, and we have both. Next slide, please. The CPI adjustment for this year is 1.5%, utilizing the February CPI. We do round most fees to the nearest quarter dollar. If there is not enough adjustment to get it to the nearest quarter, we will leave the fee alone. And so you may see some in the ordinance, which I'm sure you all read all 40 pages of the ordinance as you were trying to fall asleep and we're probably successful because it's that exciting. But I can assure you that there are a lot of fees in there, and we've gone through every single one. The revenue from the CPI increases were already built into the revenue estimates that we showed you in the fiscal year 21 budget. Next slide, please. Additionally, this year we have a user fee study that we have contracted with MGT Consulting. They recommended as part of their user fee study some larger adjustments in several fee categories. However, at this time, we are only recommending that we move forward with the CPI increases. It's been a little bit busy, and we still need to review those recommendations with the Finance Audit Committee. And so we would like to reserve the option to do that and possibly bring back recommendations at a later date for those. There's not a lot of recommendations for that initial phase one of the study. And so we still have time if we want to bring those back, if the Finance Committee is on board with that, to bring those back to you to have those effective this year. Phase two of the fee study, we've broken that up into two phases. We'll be looking at any new fees that we would potentially be looking at implementing as part of the fiscal year 22 budget process. And that could be fees for services that we're not currently charging, or maybe other cities are charging that we want to look into. And so that would be the next phase of the study, and it has not begun yet. Next slide, please. All right, so next we'll look at utility rates, and I've got some slides here from the budget workshop just to refresh our memory. On our utility rates, we have had very stable utility rates since 2011. We have, up until 2020, not adjusted on the water and wastewater portion of the rates, and then we raised those in 2020 by 5 and 10% for the surface water and 5% for water and wastewater. The surface water rates, as we were implementing the first groundwater reduction mandate in 2014 when that plant opened, that was the last time that we had adjusted that rate prior to 2020. So we've had very stable utility rates for about the last decade, with the exception of the surface water implementation. Next slide, please. And comparing to other cities, based on the TML water wastewater survey for 2020, our rates are run about 20% below the average for all cities over 50,000 in population. And this is just a sampling of those cities. It's not all of them, but as you can see, there's some larger, some smaller, but they're all over 50,000. And some have very, very low rates, some have higher rates. But all in all, we're on the low side comparing to our peer cities. Next slide. So this is the chart that we reviewed with you during the utility workshop back on August 20th. And so this would represent the residential rates and the impact that the recommended rates would have on our residential customers, and we have those broken out. The rates are made up of a base charge and then a volumetric charge. It's same as our current structure, where the more you use, the higher the rate becomes, and it's more of a conservation structure. And wastewater is a flat fee per 1,000 gallons, as well as surface water. Next slide, please. The commercial and irrigation customers have a flat rate, so they do not have the conservation structure. And this is just an example of a 2-inch commercial customer and what the impact would be on those rates. They pay a flat fee per 1,000 gallons of water all year round. And on the irrigation side, there is a winter and a summer rate. Obviously, there's going to be more use in the summer, and so it puts more demands on our system, and so then it's a higher premium for that water. On the wastewater side, they as well pay a flat fee for 1,000 gallons and the surface water fee as well. Our GRP participants who are not city customers would then pay the GRP pumpage fee which is going from 193 to 250 per 1,000 gallons. Next slide, please. The impact to the residential utility bill, and this is based on that TML survey, just to keep it on a comparative basis. This is using 10,000 gallons of water and 6,000 gallons of wastewater. Our actual residential average is a little bit less than that, but using the TML numbers, it's about $10 a month increase based on this volume of usage, and that would be what we would be benchmarking against in next year's survey. All right, next slide, please. The next rates to be adjusted are the solid waste rates. Thank you. And so, as you're aware, we have a contract for our solid waste residential collection with Republic Services. And as part of that contract, we have been negotiating with the rate adjustments and the service levels. We discussed this at length through the budget workshops. And as a result of the negotiations, the current monthly rate will be adjusted by 1.95% instead of the 2.5% called for in the original contract. There will be some change in services with the household hazardous waste program. And staff is continuing to look at options, and we'll have some further discussion on that as we bring forward that contract amendment. So the new rate would be $19.76 per month, and that would be effective on January 1. And we also set by ordinance, even though we don't bill or collect for the services, the commercial solid waste rates, and those are increasing by 2.5% across the board. Next slide, please. So with that, there's a lot in one ordinance, and just a high-level overview. Staff recommends approval of the first reading of Ordinance 2211, amending the fees for various services. And with your approval tonight, we will place the second reading of this ordinance on September 15th agenda. And with that, next slide, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Stuart.
Thank you, Mayor. Jennifer, would you please go back and explain the history of our utility bond rating and such as it relates to the utility rates, the water rates, please?
Certainly. And so every time we go to the bond market, we are rated or evaluated by bond rating agencies like Standard & Poor's and Fitch Ratings. And they could look at our utility system finances, and they compare us to utilities all over the country. And they look at our rates, and they look at our revenue streams. They look at demands on the system, future capital investment. And when they evaluated us this past year, in fiscal year, or this year actually, they evaluated us in earlier this year. As we were getting ready to sell the revenue bonds in March, they actually downgraded us. And their logic behind the rating is that our rates are not high enough, that our rates are too low, and that we need to increase our revenue streams. And so we had a utility rate. We have a utility rate model, and we had the consultant update that model this year. We have some more policy issues that we'll be working through over the next year to determine further increases, because the model does show that as we're getting ready for the 2025 groundwater reduction mandate, where we have to reduce 60% of our groundwater consumption to other water sources. We have significant capital investment to do that, and the rate model shows, and the rating agency's concerns are that our rates are not sufficient to support that. So this year's rate recommendations are a step toward getting us where those rates need to be. Over the next year, we'll be working through policy issues with City Council, and working on whether the way we charge needs to change, getting that direction from you. We also have been looking at at the request of council, utilization of our groundwater credits to defer the capital investment that is necessary to get us to that 60% groundwater reduction. And so these rates actually take that into account. And so we workshopped with you during the budget workshops the plan on utilization of some of our excess groundwater credits so that we could best manage the implementation of not only the rate increases, but how we get to where we need to be to utilize, sorry, there's a lot, I know, to utilize not only the resources that we have in our groundwater credits, but at the same time, we have debt that we have assumed from annexed MUDs that we'll be paying down. And we're trying to find the best balance to where we have enough money set aside to do the capital investments and meet the groundwater reduction mandate and overall just look at the best value for our customers. And so we took a very long-term approach to making a recommendation on the rates for this year. Hope that addresses.
Yeah, Jennifer, you can tell I'm leading the witness for the benefit of those who are not on the Finance and Audit Committee. And I remember Steve asked a question about the burden on the ratepayers, on our customers. And we had some choices because we have to get there. I mean, we have a mandate from the subsidence district, which, by the way, the Intergovernmental Relations Committee is working on actually getting us, trying to get us a little bit of relief from that. So that's something that's happening. But we have to get to a certain rate, and one of the ways was to increase every year by a certain percentage. But unfortunately, that has the effect of compounding the increase for the residents. So instead, we chose to keep the annual increase per month right about $10 over the next 3 years, rather than starting at 8 and then having it compound to 12 and 15 in the third year, something like that. So I guess I answered my own question. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Jennifer.
Steve.
Yeah, Jennifer, just for the benefit of those people that don't use much water, periodically I do get questions about, hey, I don't hardly use any water. Why do I have to pay this big fat base rate? Could you just explain that to them?
Sure. Base rates are designed to recover the fixed costs of the system. And so we have our rates designed to where we recover between 40 and 45% of our revenue from that monthly base rate. And then the rest is recovered through the volumetric rates. So those customers that don't use a lot of water aren't going to see a $10 a month increase. They're going to see a smaller increase, more like, $3 to $5, depending on how much you use. But so there's still some flexibility built in, and it's the more you use, the more you pay, is the way the system is designed, because those higher users are the ones who are really placing the demand on the system for the infrastructure.
Can you just go ahead and explain what it is that, let's see, what term did you use? Fixed costs. What are our fixed costs?
Oh, yes. Fixed costs will be all of our infrastructure, paying our debt. We have salaries and benefits for our employees who are out running the utility system. We have chemicals, electricity, and some of those are going to fluctuate, but there is a baseline of costs. We have water contracts. We have raw water costs where we are obligated to pay a certain amount for our water rights, whether we use them or not. And so those are some examples of fixed costs.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else, council? Jennifer, I just want to make one point for the public, and that is that we don't allow Fitch or S&P to drive our business. Wall Street doesn't drive our business. We set the rates to recover the maintenance, operations, and the capital cost to run and reinvest in the system. Pure and simple, this is what it costs to be able to operate the system that we operate, both groundwater, surface water, and wastewater. I'll go ahead and make the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Got a second by Jacobson. Any other questions? If you'll vote at this time, please.
A roll call.
Roll call vote. Okay, we're back to roll. Nishad? Nishad, you in?
Aye, Mayor.
Steve?
Aye.
Jennifer?
Aye.
Himesh?
Aye.
Stuart?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. That's a 7-0 vote. Thank you, council members. Item number 5C, first consideration of an action on City of Sugar Land, ordinance number 2208, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Sugar Land, Texas, approving and adopting the 2021 service plan, the 2020 assessment roll, and levying assessments for the 2020 calendar year for property located in the enclave at River Park Public Improvement District. Ms. Jennifer Brown, Director of Finance. Jennifer.
Thank you, Mayor. And I promise this is my last item tonight. I'll let Rosita do the budget public hearing. Okay, so a little background. The enclave at River Park is a public improvement district. Now, what is a public improvement district? This district was created by City Council resolution back in 2014. This district is put in place to finance the public infrastructure that the developer put in to serve this new development. Now, this area is fairly small. It is 54.5 acres, 139 platted lots, so a lot smaller than our normal, what we would see in a normal MUD development. The public improvement district is similar to a MUD, but has limited authority. It's more efficient than a MUD, and because it eliminates an extra layer of government, because you as City Council serve as the board of the public improvement district. And then we as staff fulfill the needs that contract bookkeepers and attorneys and financial advisors would fill for a municipal utility district. Next slide, please. The public improvement district was created to reimburse the developer for public infrastructure that the developer built to serve this neighborhood. This is similar to an in-city MUD, and as a reminder, we do have 6 in-city MUDs within the city, 4 in Telfair, the one at Lake Point, and then Bernie Road MUD on the north side of the city. The municipal utility districts, or this PID, rather, is available to finance streets, drainage, and utility improvements. The assessment is going to pay off the debt that was issued, and I'll talk about the debt in a moment, but this assessment is not for new amenities or new infrastructure. It is not related to the HOA by any means. There's nothing to do with the HOA or any of their facilities. This is for the public infrastructure, streets, drainage, utility, and that is something normally not paid for by the city. It is normally paid for by the developer. Those assets are then turned over to the city or conveyed to the city, and then they become city property. As mentioned in the public comments and some of the earlier discussion, in creating this PID, all buyers are required by law to be notified of the existence of the public improvement district and potential future assessments at the closing when they purchase their properties. However, this assessment is significantly less than a similar property in an in-city MUD would be paying in property taxes assessed by the MUDs. Next slide, please. So under the development agreement, which was also approved in 2014, the city agreed to reimburse the developer for $2 million of infrastructure plus up to 3 years worth of interest. And so when the developer applied for or met the requirements for reimbursement, the city reimbursed $2,125,000 to the developer, and that was paid in January of 2019. This infrastructure, like I said, is serving this individual neighborhood, and it is not something that the city would normally construct, and so it is not covered by the city's property taxes because as the way this city has developed is we've always had the assumption that new development pays for itself and that our current residents should not be paying for new development. And so while the infrastructure was built by the developer and has been conveyed to the city for maintenance, the actual payment for that initial infrastructure was not the city's responsibility. And so now that we have reimbursed the developer, we did finance that through certificates of obligation at very good interest rates. And so the debt service will now run over a 15-year period compared to, in some cases, a MUD debt could go for 30 years or more. This assessment will end once that debt is paid off. Next slide, please. The recommended assessment for 2020 is $560 per lot. For comparison purposes, the 2019 assessment was $740 per lot, so that's a 24% decrease. And based on the debt service schedule and additional contributions from the city in property taxes, we do anticipate those assessments to continue to decline in the future. The city does contribute 50% of the property taxes that we collect on these properties toward the PID. That is right in line with the way we manage our other in-city municipal utility districts. We contribute 50% of the property taxes, and we actually pay those back to the MUDs. We're doing the same thing here. So we're trying to put this area on the same ground or the same basis as the in-city MUDs. The only difference is the city as administrator versus a separate municipal utility district board. These assessments do show up on the property tax statements that the Fort Bend Tax Office bills on behalf of the PID for us. And so it does show up on the property tax bill. Next slide, please. So this chart shows the initial assessments, which date back to 2015. So these assessments have been were being paid prior to any homes, and in a lot of cases being built on the lots. They started at a little over $1,100 and now are down to $560 for 2020, which is the recommended assessment. And as you can see by the chart here, over the next 10 years, we do anticipate it declining until that debt is paid off. Next slide, please. We did hold a public hearing at the August 18th City Council meeting. We are required as part of the Texas Local Government Code in establishing a PID. We are required to direct mail notice of the assessment and the public hearing to all property owners. And so we do mail 139, or actually 143 notices, because we have several that are duplicates or split ownership. We did receive comments at the public hearing from 16 property owners. And so the council did hear from the feedback from those property owners and from the gentleman earlier this evening. Next slide, please. The recommended action based on the discussions during the budget workshops and the council's plan for the public improvement district is to approve first reading of ordinance number 2208, setting the PID assessment for the enclave at River Park at $560 per lot, and adopt a service plan for 2021 that shows essentially the next 5 years of the PID. And that is a 24% decrease. With your approval this evening, we will place second reading on the September 15th agenda. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Samash?
Hey, yeah, thank you, Mayor. Jennifer, wouldn't you say that the obligations to this PID is contractual, that the city has already entered into certain agreements that are binding?
Yes. In fact, the city's we've already fulfilled our obligations as far as reimbursement to the developer.
Right.
So, as the city issued the debt to finance the reimbursement on behalf of the PID. And so the PID assessment and the contributions from property taxes, we're only generating what we need on an annual basis to cover that debt service. We're not generating anything extra.
And I think you touched on it, but if this PID didn't exist, there could have been a MUD there that would have done probably exactly the same thing and would have had the same legal obligations and same taxing authority and everything else that this PID has, correct?
Correct, and at much higher cost because
Okay.
it's, I mean, basically the only activities of the PID now that we've made the reimbursement are staff time and the cost of mailing the notices, the cost of billing, and then bringing it to you as city council. There's no lawyers to pay. We're already
Right.
paying Meredith and her staff, so we're already paying me, so there's no additional cost associated with it.
Hey, Mayor, I know this isn't the time for comment, but if you don't mind, could I just make one?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
You know, it might be worth, assuming this passes in the future going forward, maybe at the River Park HOA meetings or at some type of open house, maybe present to the public why there is a PID. It seems like there's a lack of education, and maybe that's what's needed to kind of get some clarity on why this exists and what the unique nature of it is. This is the only one we have in the city, so it is somewhat different.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. The only thing I'd add to your question, you wouldn't have been able to create a MUD. What you'd have ended up happening is that infrastructure would have been priced into the cost of the lot and therefore the house.
That's right.
So
Right.
in other words, you'd have just been paying a whole lot more for your house and therefore a whole lot more in your mortgage.
That's exactly
which is the way
right.
it would have been priced down. Carol?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, that was going to be my comment. Yes, if you didn't have a PID of this nature, the developer could have just taken that, the cost and rolled it into the house and added, say, an average of, $15,000 onto the price of each home that would be financed by your mortgage. So this way, it's done through a PID very cost effectively, and then also the city's contributing 50% of the property taxes back to it. So this is saving the residents money the way it's been done.
Anyone else? I'll go ahead and make the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Got a second by McCutcheon. If you'll vote at this time, please.
Roll call again for me, Mayor.
Roll call. Nashad.
Aye.
Steve? Steve's an aye. You an aye, Steve? He's an aye. Himesh?
Aye.
Jennifer?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
Stuart?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. That's a 7-0 vote. Thank you, council. Item number 6, public hearing, 6A. Public hearing to receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on the proposed budget for fiscal year 2021. And then the follow-up to that will be consideration of an action on setting a date for deliberation and adoption of the fiscal year 2021 budget. We've got Rosita Bashoon, our budget manager. Rosita.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Good evening.
Good evening.
State requirement for the budget, the local government code section 102.006 requires that the city holds a public hearing on the budget. The code requires that the proposed budget be filed at least 15 days prior to the hearing, and the notice must be published in the newspaper at least 10 days, but no more than 30 days before the hearing. The code also requires that the notice advertising must include a statement on property tax revenues included in the proposed budget. The statement that was published was based on the property tax assumptions the budget was based on. The final budget document will reflect the actual property tax figures and the tax code that council will approve at a later date on the cover as required by the Texas by the local government code. Next slide, please. The state requires that the budget must be adopted by a simple majority and that the budget must be adopted prior to the tax rate. The tax rate is supposed to be adopted to support the budget Therefore, state laws require it to be adopted after the budget. The tax rate adoption, unlike the budget adoption, requires a supermajority, which is 60% or 5 affirmative votes in order to pass. In addition, there must be a separate vote after the budget and the tax rate are adopted to ratify the increase in the tax revenues in the budget. Next slide, please. The budget process started in March and overlapped with COVID impact. Staff developed 3 scenarios based on available data and strategies, and several strategies were used, such as being conservative, resilient, and responsible, keeping in mind that the city is not immune to economic impact. The budget development was shared at the City Council retreat in June with flexibility focused on critical infrastructure projects, what being conservative and meeting all fund balance policies. Next slide, please. On the revenue assumptions in the general fund, we've built in a 5% increase in maintenance and operations revenue, and it is important to note that we anticipate this occurring through a shift in the existing tax rate, meaning this is not representative of a percent increase to the average residential tax bill. Following through with the 2019 bond election, we are implementing a half-cent rate increase to move forward with the projects with focus on structural flooding. Regarding the utility fund, and based on a study, we are implementing the integrated water resource plan to meet an unfunded surface water mandate. Next slide, please. On the expenditure assumptions, we are carrying forward targeted reductions to departmental budgets and are recommended continued temporary reductions to departmental services, including deferring major expenditures for 6 months, including infrastructure rehab, managing vacancies, and continuing hiring freeze with potential of eliminating vacant positions if necessary, and reductions to the fleet and high-tech replacement spending. Next, please. The FY21 proposed budget totaled $254.37 million in operating expenditures, excluding interfund transfers. The amount shown here are based on the file budget. Next, please. The city charter requires a 5-year CIP program, with the first year being appropriated in FY21, with the out years physically constrained by the long-range forecast and our ability to fund them. Out-year projects are for planning purposes only. The CIP includes both general and enterprise CIP projects, including a phased implementation of the 2019 voter-approved GEO bond projects. Next, please. This is the original plan to phase the GEO bond projects over 3 years with a 3-cent rate increase in the first year. However, this plan may not make sense in the current economy. Next, please. With input from City Council, we developed a revised phase-in plan to better match the current economy. This plan spreads the 3-cent rate increase over 4 years from FY21 to FY24 and funds all projects within the 5-year CIP, placing heavy emphasis on drainage in the first half of the funding plan. A small increase of half-cent in FY21 is needed to start this plan. Next slide, please. Total capital project funding for FY21 is $27.5 million, which includes both general CIP as well as enterprise CIP. Next. On the residential tax bill, there's an annual increase of $27, just over $2 per month when compared to the current tax bill. Next. The monthly utility bill increase based on a 10,000-gallon water consumption is $10.04. This rate will be effective January 1st, 2021. Next, please. The current monthly solid waste rate will increase by 1.95%. The new rate of $19.76 will be effective January 1st, 2021. The household hazardous waste program will no longer be provided, and this program ends on January 1st, 2021. However, the staff is continuing to assess options for future household hazardous waste events and education. Next. The total proposed budget for FY21 is $254.37 million. Next. Here is a calendar for previous budget-related discussions, which started on August 6 through August 27. Next. The remaining dates for budget and tax rate: September 8th, it's the public hearing on the proposed tax rate. September 15th, ordinances to amend FY20 budget to projection, adopt the FY21 budget, the 5-year CIP and compensation plan, and adopt the 2020 tax rate. A vote to ratify tax revenue in the budget, and the second reading of the fee ordinance and PID assessment. Next, please. The recommendations are to hold a public hearing to receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on the proposed budget for fiscal year 2021, and a vote to place an item on the September 15, 2020 agenda for action on the fiscal year 2021 budget. Next.
At this time, council members, rather than get into any questions, we're going to go ahead and move to open the public hearing to hear anybody desiring to be heard on the date for deliberation and adoption of the fiscal year 2021 budget. Thomas, do we have anybody on the phone?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we don't have anybody on the phone. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. And I'm going to move to the action item, consideration of an action on setting a date for deliberation and adoption of the fiscal year 2021 budget. Any questions? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Got a motion by Jacobson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Got a second by Kermali.
Mayor, you need to set the date.
And the date is set for September the 15th.
Thank you.
Is that a concurrence by the puppy? The puppy concurs that September the 15th is the date. He's ready to rip. All right, we got a date of September the 15th at the next city council meeting. Councilor, good? Roll call vote. Sean?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Nishan? Himesh?
Yeah, aye.
Jennifer?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
Stuart?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. That's a 7-0 vote. We'll take it up on the 15th of September, 5:30. Item number 6B, public hearing. Receiving here all persons interested in the designation of a reinvestment zone number 2020-01 for a 19.691 acre tract of land located in Sugar Land, Texas at 500 Industrial Boulevard. And we have Alba Panate Johnson, our business development manager. Alba.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Tonight, I'll be presenting the first reading of ordinance number 2205 and the public hearing of reinvestment zone number 2020-01. I would also like to recognize James Melody from Love It Industrial, who's joining us tonight. Next slide, please. Sorry, before that, I'm sorry. Thanks. Fort Bend County and Sugar Land have the option to offer companies property tax abatements to encourage economic development within Sugar Land. The city and county do not lose money through such value-added tax abatements, as the development would not have occurred without the tax abatement. The projects result in significant property tax value and revenue to the city and county after the abatement expires, which is a maximum of 10-year term. For this project, only the county is granting the tax abatement, and the Sugar Land Development Corporation is considering a different kind of incentive for the project, so the city will receive full tax benefit of the project from the start. In addition, economic growth generated by these agreements fully benefit the local school districts as they do not participate in abatements. Next slide, please. This project includes the demolition of current structures and the construction of 3 Class A industrial buildings totaling about 300,000 square feet, and also includes an estimated capital investment ranging from $11 million to $13 million. Next slide, please. The Economic Development Department introduced the project to the Greater Fort Bend EDC, who is now tentatively negotiating a tax abatement agreement with the developer, pending the approval of the reinvestment zone. We are creating the reinvestment zone because the governing body of a city generally designates an area as a reinvestment zone. This project was reviewed with the City Council's Economic Development Committee and City Council during executive session, and the reinvestment zone does meet the criteria of retention and expansion of primary employment in Sugar Land. Next slide, please. The reinvestment totals 19.69 acres, and as you can see on the map, it is in Sugar Land, Texas at 500 Industrial Boulevard within our Sugar Land Business Park. Next slide, please. In order to create this reinvestment zone, a public hearing and first reading of an ordinance needs to be held. No inquiries or comments were received prior to this public hearing. Next, please. Next steps would be to hold a public hearing, which we're doing tonight, and to have a second reading and adoption of ordinance number 2205, which is scheduled for a later date this month. Next slide, please. And so now I'll open it up for a public hearing.
Thank you, Alba. And Stuart corrected me. I think it's Alvin Panate Johnson, correct?
Yes.
There we go, Stuart. Good job, buddy. Okay, here we go. Let's open to public hearing to hear all persons interested in designation of reinvestment zone number 2001 for 16.691 acre tract of land located in Sugar Land, Texas at 500 Industrial Boulevard. Thomas, do we have anybody?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor.
We'll go ahead and close the public hearing, and we're going to move to first consideration of an action on City of Sugar Land ordinance number 2205, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Sugar Land, Texas, creating reinvestment number 2001 for a 19.691 acre tract of land located in Sugar Land, Texas at 500 Industrial Boulevard in Sugar Land. Council members, what's your pleasure? Questions? Steve?
Yes. Alba, can you speak to how long this facility has been vacant and its condition that we'd like to have it torn down?
Yes. Can I defer to Devin on the timeline of the building and how long it's been vacant?
Good afternoon, or good evening. So the facility has been vacant for about 2 to 3 years, and the developer is planning to demolish the existing, most of the existing buildings on the site and to start fresh. So it is would be our largest redevelopment property in our current business park.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Devin. Nishad?
Devin, this has nothing to do with the other, I think, 295,000 square feet that's being built. I thought that's along industrial as well. Those two different properties?
There along industrial, I'm wondering if you're thinking of the Transwestern development that's up off of Dairy Ashford and West Airport?
No, there's something else on industrial that we've had brought to Sugarland 4B, if I'm not mistaken. I thought there's something else along industrial that's being built as well.
Well, we have had, nothing comes to mind for me on industrial. This has been the only project on Industrial Boulevard recently. There are 2 sites that are redevelopable. One found a tenant that was perfect for what its previous use was, and so that's on the north part of industrial. But this is the only development that I can think of that's on Industrial Boulevard. We do have Johnson Development Associates out of South Carolina, they developed a industrial spec project on Gillingham, which is actually on the backside of this property. They're very close to each other. And then Transwestern is developing an industrial complex at West Airport and Dairy Ashford.
Okay, that's right. Thank you.
Anyone else? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Porter and Ms. McCutcheon.
If
Got
you'll
a
roll
motion,
call,
got a
please,
second.
Mayor.
Roll call vote. Nishad.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
Himesh.
Aye.
Jennifer.
Aye.
Carol.
Aye.
Stuart.
Aye.
And I'm an aye, and it's a 7-0 vote. Thank you, council members. Item number 7. Thank you, Devin. Thank you, Alba.
Thank you.
Item number 7, City Council City Manager Report. 7A, City Council Member Reports. Carol, let's start with you.
No report, Mayor.
Stuart.
No report, Mayor.
Steve.
Hello.
Jennifer.
No report, Mayor.
Nishad.
Keep it consistent, no report.
Man, look at that. Okay, and I don't have a report either. Item number 7B, City Manager Report. Michael?
No report, Mayor.
Yeah, we got no report. Man, look at this, we're batting 1,000. Item number 8, Closed Executive Session. 8A. Oh, Closed Executive Session. Closed Executive Session is authorized by Chapter 551 Texas Government Code in accordance with Section 5510H7. Item number B, Section 551074, Public Officers. At this time, we are going to recess into closed executive session. Man. We're right behind you, we hope. Good night. Thank you.